Welcome to 5 Points Blues presentation of Back to the Basics. Everything you wanted to know about Cowboys football, but were too afraid to ask. Here are your hosts, Nikki Harrison and Kristi Scales.
Hello. Welcome to Back to the Basics. Everything you wanted to know about Cowboys football, but were too afraid to ask. I'm Nikki Harrison here with Kristi Scales. We have a special guest with us today. We have the voice of the Dallas Cowboys, Brad Sham. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and Brad is entering his 40th season announcing Cowboys football, but even though it's off-season, there's no rest for the weary. Brad's new podcast called Then and Now launches tomorrow, and I know you're really excited about this, and tell us about who you launch with.
Well, I'm having a ball doing this, and I'll bury the lead for a minute just as a build-up. This is something that I've been working on and thinking about for the better part of a year, and there are a lot of podcasts that talk about hot sports opinions of the day. Mm-hmm. This isn't that. I'm not going to ask anybody about probably anything controversial. I'm certainly not going to have anybody on and say who should be cut, traded, fired, signed. What I like to do is find out who someone is. How did they get from where they were to today? The name Then and Now came to me because I started thinking about the fact that there's really not much, certainly regarding the Cowboys out there, that's like that. And when I started thinking about guys that I worked with when I started doing the games in the 70s, and even before that, who I know that now, all the way through to today, I'm the only person I know of who knows all of those guys and can have that conversation. And then the decision came about that we wouldn't limit it to the Cowboys, and so it's Then and Now. So we're launching, as you said, Kristi, tomorrow, and Tony Romo is going to be the first guest that we'll use. We've got, I think, 11 in the vault right now.
That's awesome.
And the idea is to find out what they're thinking about as people. So you can subscribe. You'll be able to get it soon, I hope, on iTunes.
Okay.
But if you go to vocalnow.com, VOKAL now.com, that's the website of the company that's actually producing the podcast. And you can subscribe, and they'll probably launch every other week right now. So I have them recorded with Tony. He's the biggest recent name. That's why we're starting with him. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing in there about who the Cowboys should draft or what they have to do about. It's about, now I did get the opportunity to ask him some things, like one of the things I enjoyed asking him to hear him answer was, you've had the opportunity to work with two of the most interesting wide receivers in the history of the game, Terrell Owens and Des Bryant. I said, listen carefully, don't answer a question I'm not asking you, but from a quarterback's position, what was the challenge to get each of them to give the most that they had to the team? So hearing him answer that was interesting.
I bet. I can't wait to hear that.
Yeah.
And so we've got the one with Tony, and we have Daryl Johnston and Roger Staubach, and Michael Irvin and Darren Woodson and Vern Lundquist and Eric Nadel, the voice of the Rangers, and Dale Hansen and DeMarcus Ware. I know I'm forgetting.
Drew Pearson, because I know that
Yes.
you want to get him before the draft, right? The way that he trolled the Eagles fans last year.
And specifically, we were going to just roll them out in the order that we recorded them, but when we had the opportunity to get Drew just a couple of weeks ago, I convinced the producers that it would be a good idea to run that one before the draft. So I think it'll be Tony tomorrow. I forget what day it is. Tony tomorrow.
Tuesday.
Thank you. And in 2 weeks, probably the one with Daryl Johnston. And then 2 weeks after that, the conversation with Drew. And that'll be still maybe 2 weeks before the draft. And so that'll get everybody fired up. And if you've never heard him tell the story about how that whole rant got born in his head. It's
Drew
great.
Pearson, wasn't he with the commissioner and they were about to walk out on stage last
He wasn't going to do any of
that.
that. Yeah, he wasn't going to do any of that. But they were back there woofing, a bunch of old guys woofing about, their playing days and the fans, which is, I think, what everyone is hoping will happen and expects to happen at AT&T Stadium on the 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Yes.
That the fans got so into it and created such an atmosphere that for Drew, he became a player again, and he got competitive. And so and Roger Goodell egged him on. He said, "Well, I can't say this," and Goodell said, "Oh, say it." and Drew said, "Really? Okay." And then he went out there and he just went with it. And what you saw was raw, real Drew Pearson emotion, and that was the best part of it.
Yeah,
That's fabulous.
What I love about the guests that you're having is that it crosses generations, right? And so those of us who have been fans of the Cowboys for longer than we care to admit, someone like a Roger Staubach, we think that we know everything there is about Roger because there are some Cowboys fans who have followed him from the early 1960s when he was still at the Naval Academy. So was there something that you learned about Roger in this podcast that you didn't know before, or just kind of a different side that was brought out that we as fans don't get to see so much?
I don't know if there was anything that I learned about Roger. See, with some of them, like Roger and Drew, there were some things that I remembered that were fairly well known at the time that people have just forgotten and maybe 2 generations have never heard. Like the time that when the Cowboys' offices were on the 11th floor of the Yale Towers, I think it was, at Central Expressway and Yale. And Staubach had a meeting one day with Tex Sham, now 11th floor. And outside of Schramm's office was a narrow ledge that was protected by a small black lattice-work fence. And Roger thought Tex was making him wait too long, so he crawled out on the ledge. Now,
outside the building,
outside
on
the
the
building.
11th floor.
So Tex Schramm is on the phone with Pete Rozelle. And he has his feet up on the desk, and he's looking out at this 11th floor beautiful expanse overlooking all of Dallas north of Central Expressway.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, his quarterback appeared on the 11th floor ledge. And hearing
Sham's blood pressure was at that moment.
Yes, he said I almost had a heart attack.
You know, it's so funny. I saw DeMarcus Lawrence and his agent on the 3rd floor right here at the Star, just outside Jerry's office.
See, that might have
trying
been.
to get that long-term contract.
And
Take
so
a page out of Roger's book.
Hearing Roger, I mean, I knew that story, so that wasn't new. But there are a lot of people who don't know that story,
Never heard
and
that
hearing
story.
Roger tell it was pretty funny. But I'm trying to find a different lead-in for everybody, an icebreaker. Now, these are all people that I've known for decades. So in Romo's case, the first question I asked him, which people will hear tomorrow, I hope, is ever since anyone around here has known you, when we think of you, Tony Romo, we think of boundless enthusiasm. And so my question is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And just let him go and see. And the idea is to not prepare everything. Have a conversation. Right. I don't even like the word interview. I want to have a conversation. Let me ask you a question. Here's something different. I'll actually listen to what you say.
That's not a modern media interview.
No, and then based on what you say, then I'll think of something else, and we'll have a conversation.
Yeah, let's talk.
Exactly,
like
and
that.
so that's that. So in Staubach's case, you asked if there was anything I learned about him new. My question to him, my opening question to him was, there's a new guy on the gate at the pearly gates. There's a new guy on the reception desk. And you check in, and he looks at your resume, and he says, I see here that you've done quite a lot, Mr. Staubach. What's your greatest accomplishment?
And just let him go.
Let him go.
I love it.
And the answer, by the way, was starting to date his wife when they were in the 8th grade. And he didn't even take 2 seconds. He answered it immediately and then talked about that. Now then you build the conversation from there.
Right. Wow. I can't wait.
Should we turn the tables on Brad and have him answer the same question?
Sure.
No, seriously, and whether you want to answer it from a personal standpoint or from a career standpoint.
What's the question?
The thing that you just asked, what you asked Roger.
And what was that?
That you're checking in at
the I knew you were. She's had more than a quarter of a century's experience at tuning me out.
Brad and I have worked together. We're coming up on our 28th season.
That's amazing.
So we have been
so cool.
work husband and work wife.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Douglas Barricklow, who's our producer, who
Right.
adds the sound effects. Is it 28, Douglas? 28 as well with Douglas. So I can hear 27.
26 for me.
26
I'm a couple
for Douglas.
behind you.
Oh, he's a latecomer to the party. Then,
No, I'm the
Douglas
latecomer.
Barricklow. Okay, so you almost got away from answering the question. You can answer it from a career standpoint if you prefer not to do personal.
I don't mind personal because I think the first gut reaction that I had to answering the question, what's your greatest accomplishment, is that I haven't had it yet. I do think that if CBS Radio hasn't offered me a contract for the 2018 season yet, so I don't know that I'll be doing the games, but I don't know that I won't. So presuming that I am, I think hitting 40 years is an accomplishment.
Absolutely.
And being able to still have the passion and enjoyment for it that, in fact, it grows every year. And the fact that I can have these conversations with guys who played in the 70s and guys who are playing now, and have a personal relationship with all of them, that's a big accomplishment. I think.
sure.
And personally, I think my most important accomplishment is establishing a strong relationship with God and living in my faith for the last 12 years or so, and it's just changed my life.
Absolutely.
There is one other story you mentioned earlier about your visit with Drew Pearson, and we kind of focused on what he did at the draft last year and trolling the Eagles fans. And Nikki, I'll confess that I know a little bit about some of Brad's podcasts because we sat together through 4 games of the NCAA tournament at the AAC last week.
That's
we were 12
There was some
hours
dead
together.
time. There was some dead time.
4 games in 12 hours, and with a meal in between. But you were telling me a fun story that Drew related about growing up playing youth sports with a
Don't even say
with
it.
a certain player.
So my question to him was, and I think I even said I get to channel my inner James Lipton, for anybody who watches Bravo. I said, who's Joey Theismann? That's Joe Theismann, which was his name before he changed it at Notre Dame. And when he was the shortstop and Drew was the second baseman on their high school baseball team, and they were the 2 guards on their high school basketball team.
Whoa.
And Drew was the receiver and Joe was the quarterback on their high school football team.
Wow.
Did you
No,
know
I had
that,
no
that
idea.
one of the greatest Redskins and one of the greatest Cowboys during the biggest rivalry in sports at that time
Childhood
were
friends.
yeah
No, had no idea.
Yeah, had played.
That's a great story. That's amazing.
I don't know if they were friends, but they were teammates. Drew sounded like they were friends.
Yeah, but you were talking before about how this is expanding beyond the Cowboys, Dale Hansen and the like. So you're targeting Mavericks, Rangers.
I'm thinking about. I'm trying. I'm not good, Kristi, at thinking outside the box, but I'm trying to, in this case, because I think we have an opportunity to spread these stories, tell some great stories. So for 3 years in the middle '90s, I did the Rangers. And I know Pudge Rodriguez, and I'd like to sit down with Pudge.
Absolutely.
And talk to him. And because I covered the Mavericks when they came to town, I know Rolando Blackman and Derek Harper. I would candidly love to sit down with Mark Cuban. I actually sent an email to his gatekeeper guy the day that there were some unfortunate Mavericks news that broke. So the next day I sent him one. I said, maybe we won't do Mark right now.
Yeah.
But I can sit down with Ro and I can sit down with Harp and talk about the evolution of the Mavericks, because both of those guys have been associated with the team from virtually the time it came here and was founded, through lean years, interesting years, building a following for pro basketball in Dallas, through a championship, in Harper's case, doing the TV. Ro has been in their front office for years, right up through now. Want to do one with Nancy Lieberman? Mm-hmm. I did a basketball game with Nancy on ESPN at Louisiana Tech many years ago. Love to do one with her.
Yeah. See, Nancy's my sports hero.
Yes, she.
Yeah, the greatest arguably the greatest basketball player in history, female basketball player in history, star at Old Dominion, but she was part of the Dallas Diamonds,
right?
Which we had a women's professional basketball
Which Eric
league.
Nadel was the broadcaster.
Yeah, so
for.
I mean, there are all these ties between.
So Nikki
your
Kristi,
guests.
when I started talking to Kristi about this, she then started firing messages to me about different people. Her producer hat just came
That's
on.
right.
Mike Madonna.
Pretty good.
I said, yes, Mike Madonna would be great, but I'm not. And I'm not trying to cover every sporting base.
Got it.
I might.
But also, I think, like Roger Staubach, Drew Pearson, there was no social media when
Correct.
they played. There was no paparazzi when they played, no TMZ. So there are, I'm sure, lots of stories that we haven't heard that they would love to share.
And some they wouldn't.
And some they wouldn't. But the point is that I know some of those stories, and they know I'm not going to ask them about them.
There is a certain trust level here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the thing over the past 39 years, and 3 more with the Rangers that you've built up to.
Fabulous.
But can we ask you a couple of current Cowboys
Sure.
questions? But before that, let's give the information one more time on Then and Now and how people can find it starting tomorrow.
Right now, you can go to Vocal Media's website, which is vocalvokal.com.
Okay.
Vocalnow.com, and just look they have a list of all of their podcasts. That's what they do. And you'll see the logo, Then and Now, with my name. And you should be able to subscribe today, and then it'll show up in your feed every time we drop one.
Awesome.
And hopefully it'll be on iTunes soon.
Very good.
Current Cowboys question, because so you said that the podcast is not about hot sports.
Not about
opinion,
hot
and
sports.
we're not, but we do want.
But
your
people
hot
do
sports.
have them.
You know,
Yes.
I do want to ask yours because when the Cowboys were struggling towards the end of last season, the bandwagon started to empty a little bit.
Well, we're familiar with that.
We're familiar with that. And then when they don't sign a big free agent in the first week of free agency, oh my gosh, there's all sorts of room now on the Cowboys. So, there are some Cowboys fans that are feeling like the Cowboys are getting left out. And so I guess I'm just asking you.
Are they getting left out? So my pushback on that question is, are they really Cowboys fans, or are they winning fans? No, I'm serious.
No,
I'm serious. They want to win. They
exist.
want trophy. They don't just want to win. I spoke to an audience on a program several weeks ago, a couple of months now, with Emmett and Charlotte, and I'm forgetting who the third person was, but I said, if you're a sports fan, hold up your hand. Everybody, there were 1,500 people. Everybody held. And if you like your team to win, hold up your hand. Everybody held up their hand. And if you think the Cowboys won last year, hold up your hand. Nobody held up their hand. I said, you are aware they were 9-7. Okay, I'm not saying it was good. It's not saying it was anything that anybody wanted. Ask them in New York or Cleveland or San Francisco or Chicago if they had a good year or a bad year. And so we lose, in my opinion, perspective. And I think, frankly, and it's been this way since I started on the broadcast in 1976, that people here are so spoiled by the championships that they won in the 70s and then again in the 90s that the only thing that's acceptable is holding up the trophy. Don't tell me you just want to go deep in the playoffs. You're lying. You don't want to just go deep in the playoffs. Don't tell me you just want to go to the Super Bowl. You're lying. You want to win the Super Bowl, and the day the Super Bowl is won, you'll be asking how it can be done again next year.
Oh, yeah.
That's the nature of fans.
Sure.
So that said, I understand the frustration that people feel when everybody else is signing players and the Cowboys aren't signing anyone. Just to quote Aaron Rodgers, just relax. This is what fans do. $55 million or whatever it was for Brandon Carr. 3 years in, Brandon Carr hadn't got any interceptions. Everybody wants to run him out of town.
Yeah.
What are they doing?
Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
Okay, so how are you? By the way, he never missed a game. He was a solid player, and he made the community better. Right. We don't care about any of that. He just didn't have 15 interceptions. So, okay, they don't want to spend that kind of money anymore for a guy that you don't know. They don't have the salary cap to spend for Olivier Vernon, what the Giants did. So how do you do it? Then you look at the Patriots model, and you try to find smart bargains. You can spend less money smart and have it be effective. Mm-hmm. They thought they were doing that last year. It didn't work. Stephen Paya got hurt. He was going to be a starter. Nolan Carroll, I'm not sure his heart was really in playing football, and that didn't work out. Okay, so they signed 3 or 4 guys, didn't work out. So they're going to sign some players. Mm-hmm. Now, do you really want to go spend fill in the blank, whatever the number is even today for Ndamukong Suh? Do you care what he's like in the locker room? Do you care what he'd be in the system? Do you care what the chemistry would be? Do you care what it would be? Why do you think the Dolphins let him go? Mm-hmm. They made him the highest paid player in the league 3 years ago, and now they literally couldn't give him away. Well, that's the guy you're signing if you sign him. So be sure you know what you're doing with your money. The cap doesn't, it goes up every year. But the cap is always the cap. You have to be smart. You have to. Now, do they need help? Absolutely. Today, they're not as good a team as the one that we saw that day in Philadelphia because Orlando Scandrick's gone, Keith Smith is gone,
Kyle Wilber,
and Anthony Hitchens.
Yeah, that
more
was
to the point. I'm still not really.
Brad and I are not real happy about that. But they couldn't afford $9 million for him, and that's what he got from the Kansas City Chiefs on average. So good for Anthony. We shouldn't be personally, great for him. But
I think, Kristi, the answer to the question is 2 weeks away.
Yeah, don't
for sure.
Yeah, don't press the panic button. And the other thing that's important is, what was the number one priority for the team going into the offseason? Wasn't it retaining DeMarcus Lawrence, right?
Yes.
You could argue that was one of the top, if not number one, top 2 or 3 things to do.
I always thought that the number one priority was finding a way to keep Hitchens because you knew you could tag Lawrence.
You could tag Lawrence.
So you kind of could figure out what that was going to cost. You didn't want to let him go. So you can tag Lawrence, second round tender Irving. You're going to get a deal done with Zach Martin.
Right.
Now your uncertainty is Anthony Hitchens, whose value I'm not sure they really appreciated all the way to the top of this building. So I think if you go into the coaching wing, they absolutely did.
Yeah.
And they didn't accomplish that. Now, and as you said, there were 9 million reasons why they couldn't do it. But I thought that was if you're going to say they really had a good offseason, then they found a way to do that. So now they've got a fullback back who they had,
Jameis
Olawale, who I believe went to the Pro Bowl as a special teams player about 3 years ago with the Raiders.
And that's crucial because we lost Kyle Wilber and Keith Smith to Oakland, so we need a core guy.
Yeah, that special teams thing is going to be interesting. We'll see how it unfolds. Rich Bisaccia, as you and I both know, went back to working with John Gruden, who gave him his start in pro football. Well, Keith Smith and Kyle Wilber are 2 of his most important core guys. I thought one of the Cowboys' weaknesses last year was that they had 6 linebackers, and besides Sean Lee, they had, and maybe to an extent Jalen Smith, they had like 3 linebackers who they didn't want playing defense. They only wanted them on special teams, and they had 3 more who couldn't play special teams. Well, I don't think that's ideal.
No.
So I think that they needed to get younger there, and I think Kyle Wilbur had a nice career here. He won some games. He helped them. And he's at a point where I don't know how much defense they wanted him to play. And I think in Oakland, he'll probably just go play special teams. And here, I think they needed someone younger and cheaper who could play defense also. So it's incumbent on them now in this there's still some linebackers right now in free agency that aren't signed.
Correct.
And I think there are some linebackers who can help them. And I think they need a couple in the draft. And if they wanted to spend a premium pick on one, it wouldn't hurt my feelings.
Okay. Now, quick question for the Back to the Basics audience. These linebackers that you're talking about, what are they doing? Are they just waiting for the phone to ring?
Oh, yeah.
Free agents?
Yeah, there's various they are really, Nikki, what the league calls what the vernacular calls second tier guys. So the top tier free agents are the ones who Kristi's talking about, who went out and got all the big money, the quarterbacks, obviously. But then there's a few other positions who they became available, and those guys got a lot of money right away. The guard who went from Carolina to Jacksonville, Norwell, and there's a couple of guys like that.
Okay.
And the first week, Stephen Jones says this, I think, really well. If the money you spend on free agents the first week, you spend great player money on good players, and you spend average player good player money on average players. You always overspend.
Gotcha.
So these linebackers who are still out there, some of them are older, some of them are limited in the system they were playing in, some of them may not be a salary cap fit for the team they're on, but once released, they might be a different economic fit for a new team.
Oh, okay.
And other teams have different salary cap situations.
For sure.
When DeMarcus Ware left here, A, he'd had 2 years of back problems. B, the Broncos had way more cap room than the Cowboys had. And if he wasn't able to perform at the level that he turned out to perform at, then it was not going to be as big an impact for them as it would have been here. And so economically, it was hard to see him go. But economically, you certainly could understand why what the Cowboys were spending on DeMarcus at that point didn't equate the production they were getting. And it wasn't his fault. It was how his back was.
Yeah.
So he wound up having 1 great year, 2 good years, 1 great year in Denver, and good for him. But sometimes a player's salary cap impact on one team is different than it is on another team. So there's a guy named Preston Brown, who I'm a fan of. Navarro Bowman was released by the Raiders, and the Cowboys looked at him when the 49ers let him go last year. These are not long-term solutions necessarily, but they're short-term solutions.
And they've done the Jeremy Minceys of the world, who were second-tier guys but come in and can be very productive. I think the best description, the difference between week 1 of free agency with the top-level guys and then the second week is kind of like buying from Nordstrom and then the next week Nordstrom Rack. You can still get some really awesome stuff.
Yes,
and better deals.
Better deals. You're not paying as much for what can often be the same quality.
But the answer to your question, Nick, is that what those guys are doing is sitting by the phone, and their agents are calling everybody, and they're conferring all the time, and they're talking to teams who have linebacker needs, and at some point, most of them will sign.
They will sign. That's good news. That's good news.
Yeah. Well, hey, we're out of time already.
Wow. Wow.
It flies when we're having fun.
It does.
That's the great thing about a podcast is you can just keep going and going. And
did one with Michael Irvin today for 45 minutes. He said, well, that was quick.
And then you had Darren Woodson. Was that last night?
Did Woodson yesterday afternoon, doing Aikman later on tonight.
Oh, wow. See, he's lining it up.
Yeah.
So again,
I need a day off.
Then and Now at vocal.com, VOKAL, for the Then and Now podcast with Brad Sham. Thanks for being on.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Nikki, thank you. It's been fun. All right, Douglas, thank you for working there as the producer on the other side. And we appreciate everybody joining us on everything you wanted to know about football, but we're too afraid to ask, right here on 5 Points Blue.
This has been a production of 5 Points Blue, DallasCowboys.com, and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about them Cowboys?